So John, living through this is a lot, but living through this and also making a film about it. Talk to us a little bit about how you kept filming, because I mean, there's so much going on. This is your family, this is your life. A lot of serious situations. Were there moments where you just for a moment said, I can't film, this is ridiculous?
Yeah, there's a lot to that, especially the wife part. It was difficult, it was really difficult, obviously doing both. But I did have Molly's support in the idea, but the thing that was, I think, most interesting was that there was times when I was too aware that I was allowing myself to be filmed, and I started in really terrible, embarrassing times of not knowing what to do. I would tell them to stop filming. And it was usually involving an emergency or death or some tragic incident, and then I realized, what am I doing? Like, this is... so I had a talk with the crew. I said, look, I'm going to tell you this, and I'll never say it again. No matter what I say after this, you don't listen to me. And I said it as quickly as I could, and I just said, if I ever tell you to stop rolling, don't listen, back up 10 feet, hide behind a tree, and keep shooting. And they did.
And when was that in the process? Was that a year 2 realization?
That was probably year like 3, 4. I mean, they were shooting stuff, but I realized that I was starting to self-edit, because as I was becoming more experienced, I was becoming more self-aware of this, like, as a need as a filmmaker, where you just kind of want to be seen and welcomed into the community. I had this like sudden desperation to be seen and welcomed into the farming community, and I realized that I was going to be exposing all my weaknesses in like a magnified cinematic way. But it really is what ended up in the film, and I'm glad I had that moment of realization.
Yeah, I mean, the cinematography is beyond stunning. I think everybody was like, wow. Yeah, no, it's really, really beautiful. So my question is, I mean, you've done a lot of wildlife cinematography, but then to kind of shift gears and also just be shooting people and your family and having people shoot you, what was that transition like?
Well, I mean, we were so preoccupied with the intensity of the experience that I didn't even really think about it, especially for the first 5 years. I didn't think I was going to make a film. I was just documenting things. I knew at some point maybe, but I didn't know what the story would be about, because I had no interest in telling a story about a husband and wife couple floundering around like fish out of water. I feel like that had been told. I was looking for like the things Alan was telling me about. I was looking for these mutualistic relationships, these examples of symbiosis, and the return of this nature that was going to help balance out all these epidemics of pests and disease, and essentially the source of Molly's and my greatest fears. And so that was the story that interested me, but I didn't know who the characters were. And then around year 5, there was one incident in particular. We had an aphid problem on the farm since the beginning that was getting progressively worse. And aphids sort of suck the nectar out of plants, and they take the energy out of the plant, essentially. And one of the predators of the aphid is a ladybug. But the aphids are protected by ants. And around year 5, we saw the population of ladybugs, because of all the habitat we created, be so overwhelming to the ants that were protecting the aphids, it destroyed the aphid population. And then I realized that there were these examples of this type of like keystone player coming back and balancing these things out. So at year 5 is when I said, I've been actually shooting inadvertently a lot of the keystone players in the story.
Amazing. And I mean, it was also so staggering to me that when you were looking for a consultant on this kind of symbiotic farming, you couldn't find anyone but Alan. And I'm wondering if things have changed in the last, 10 years, and also since this film came out. Have people watched this and reached out to you? And is there kind of this resurgence of a more holistic approach to farming?
Yeah, I think one thing I will say that's, for me, very hopeful, I mean, aside from just living in a very vulnerable and reconnected way with an ecosystem, is how incredibly resilient and responsive nature is once you become conscious of the consequences of the decisions that you make when trying to interact with it. And I will say that, since the 70s, from the beginning of the organic movement till now, it's been a long and very painful road to get people to understand what organics is. But I got to say, in the last 5 years, the embracing of what regenerative agriculture is has been like 100 times faster. And I think because it's way more visual. It's way more intuitive, and it involves sort of reestablishing a direct connection and understanding of the ecosystem, which is the planetary immune system, which is regulated by biodiversity and topsoil. The gut lining of our entire planet, the immune system, is regulated by those two things. And I think that makes sense to people, and so I'm watching that catch on, and that's been the experience that I've seen develop from the film.
We'll take some questions from the audience, and I will repeat your question so everyone hears it. So the question is, which does John consider himself more of, a farmer or a cinematographer?
Well, I quit the business in 2009. No, you didn't. Right? And I felt very embraced by the experience of this film. It's in theaters in 22 countries, so I'm like, oh, that's appealing to me, because I didn't know that voice that I've had inside me was the thing that would maybe unlock these opportunities. And I feel like I have a lot more story to tell. I feel like the Biggest Little Farm was the setup and the intro to the sort of Serengeti that we've built. And now I can go a lot deeper into the things that are really fascinating to really the story. So I consider myself a farmer, a filmmaker, a father, and a husband.
Sounds like a book title.
Yeah, that's right. And he had a nervous breakdown at 49.
No. All right, are there more questions? Well, I was wondering, I mean, all of us are watching all these images coming out of California with the fires, and so what's happening with your farm recently?
Yeah, so so fires are part of a chaparral sort of biome. It's a normal occurrence. Usually it's from lightning, not necessarily from Edison power poles in modern day. That's kind of how it's happening. And what's abnormal over the last 8 years is the extreme low humidity mixed with a wind speed that during the Santa Ana winds, which is this occurrence that happens every fall and winter, it would normally be 35 to 50 mile an hour winds, and now they're 50 to 80. So this last week, they were 80 miles an hour for like 2 days, and the closest fire of a massive, so we had the Thomas Fire broke out 5 miles away from the farm, and that's nothing because it burned 45 miles towards Montecito. But this fire broke out, Maria Fire. I was actually in San Francisco, and I left early, and it was 125 acres in 30 minutes, and in 6 hours it burned 10,000 acres. So we've just embraced it. We're like, you know what? We're in it. We're doing this. We're going to be here with the animals. So we've bought, the guys have Nomex jumpsuits. We've got a little mini fire truck. I always say, I don't know what we'll do with it. Maybe we'll help Molly drive her roller ball off the farm. But I think it is a bit of what we're going to be dealing with, and it is the extreme winds that concern me the most. I'll take a hurricane any day over. I'm from Maryland originally, and I was like, oh, hurricanes are the worst. But no, I'll take a hurricane.
Right here, yes.
Yeah, so
I'm just going to repeat the question just so everybody.
Sure.
So when did the farm become self-sustaining? Because it started off with a little bit of seed money, and when did it?
So we have two fundings sort of mandates from our investor. One is innovation, and the innovation is something that we can share and something that has impact. Most of that is in our soil sciences. We're partnered with like UC Davis and Cal Poly. We've done studies with them. So that part doesn't have to be recouped, but the agricultural operation is about 20 people. And that we're probably getting close to breaking even here, but we knew that it was going to be a long-term investment because that farm had been extractively farmed for 45 years. So the bank had been robbed. And we were coming back in and we were going to invigorate and bring this soil and this whole landscape back to life. We all knew, including our investors, it was going to be a 7 to 8 year investment. But it's not to say that regenerative agriculture always takes that long to find a profit. But I think we have to ask ourselves, is the $700 billion a year spent in subsidies in a farming economy where there's an increase in bankruptcy of 24% just this year, the highest suicide rates among industrial farmers ever in the history of farming, and we're paying for those subsidies out of our tax dollars. They're farming, and this is not to point the finger at the farmer. I just say we're all complicit in how we got here. So let me just, I buy cheap food too, used to. But we're paying for it again in the loss of topsoil, paying for it again in the loss of water, right? We're paying for it again in the lack of nutrient density that is in the foods that we eat. So we're paying for it in healthcare. So it's a biosecurity issue, it's a public health issue, it's a national security issue when we as a people allow our soil to be destroyed. Just let me say one more thing, 85% of what we grow in Ventura County gets shipped out of the county. 60% of that gets shipped out of the country. And in the last 8 years, the water level in our aquifers dropped over 150 feet. They've reduced our water allocation by 25%. We're not going to be farming in Ventura County in 30 years. What is the economic sustainability of this method of farming where we keep asking, is regenerative farming a profitable option? But the moon and Mars sort of set up the example of what the opposite of that looks like.
We have time for one last question. Yes. So the question is whether everything he's learning in his example, has it rippled out to other farmers, whether it's in America or worldwide or anywhere?
Yeah, in the beginning, there weren't a lot of supportive farmers in our area. A couple of them say, can't feed the world with this way of growing food, but if they look at it, neither are they. They're just feeding a section of population. But I will say those same individuals have come back around the farm around year 6 and 7 and asked why we're not facing similar pest issues. I had one even ask about the duck program. And that is the share and exchange of information that we've lost over the 75 years. There's no lore that connects us back to these ways of innovating with nature. Right? Those individuals are long gone. They would have to be 105 years old to really be teachers. And on an optimistic note, too, there's 11 states, I believe, in the U.S. that have adopted healthy soils initiatives where they're subsidizing now cover crop. And people say, what can we do? What can we be? What is the thing that we can believe in here that will really move the needle? And I don't know for sure if climate change exists because of the things that we do as humans. There's certain speculations around that. But here's what I do know. We're seeing extreme imbalances because of some imbalance. And that is the breakdown of biodiversity and the loss of topsoil, which is the alchemizer of all death back into life. It sequesters carbon, it sequesters methane, right? It helps to prevent the oxidization of nitrogen. Those are the 3 principal ingredients that create, an atmospheric maybe effect on climate. So we have this opportunity, and I will say the needle is moving and people are seeing it. In California, I think they put 28 million into the Healthy Soils Initiative, and in our county, which is an enormous county, only 4 people have applied for the grants. But I think when they see stories like this, it gives them a little bit more of a hope, and also doesn't create the stigma that goes along with thinking about farming in a regenerative way. Normally they shame you and they call you a hippie or a tree hugger. They need to be able to go to the local IHOP and have the community of people be like, oh, it's really cool that you're doing cover crop. Tell me about that. How much water are you saving? We saved 140 million gallons of water this year on 24 inches of rain that fell on our property. That's 140 million gallons of water that didn't leave the property, went back into the aquifer, didn't take topsoil with it. And I think, to me, there's really no other number that anyone needs to understand.
On that note, thank you well, we're a little out of time. Maybe he can answer in the lobby, but thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you all
so
so much.
much, John, for being
Thank you
here.
for having me.
Thank you.